we started Annie's project, as I said, to deal with risk. So we think of this is one of the 5 major risks is production. And the things that you can do to control production risk is enterprise diversification. And the farm credit people kind of covered everything we're covering, just in a very condensed format. They mentioned that too on one of his slides I saw. Then crop insurance, and using new technologies to make things more efficient, control labor cost and other costs. So when you're starting a new enterprise, what knowledge and management capabilities are needed? Like I said before, you can think of this as the whole farm is a new farm, or you may be adding something new to your farm. So what are your capabilities and what are needed? And do you have them already? Are they readily available? And do you really have a serious commitment to this new enterprise? And I noticed yesterday as the women were following through, they made some changes in their plan. Doing the SWOT analysis, doing all these plans, make you think on paper, is this really what I want to do? And that makes more sense to do it on paper and to make sure you can do it there before you go out and experiment in the real world and get into more serious trouble. How much capital investments do you need for this enterprise? What about labor and other inputs? Do you have a market? Where are the markets? And how does this impact your other enterprises? Like I said, I'm finding more and more people are thinking, well, like greenhouses, for instance, as an example. Most greenhouses started growing bedding plants in the spring, and they build the greenhouse the size they need for the bedding plants. And then they think, I have this big capital investment. What do I do the rest of the year? So what do? They fill it up with poinsettias in the fall. Well, what's happened? The demand for poinsettias isn't as large as the demand for bedding plants, so the price is plummeted on poinsettias because there's overproduction. So then you think, do I close my greenhouse down, or do I put something else there? And can I add something like mums in the fall or something else during the summer? Or can I add an alternative maybe outside and grow vegetables in the summer? So, I probably wouldn't be able to grow greenhouse tomatoes if I'm growing bedding plants, because they're going to be in that greenhouse at the same time. So that's what I mean by complementing what you already have. You want to utilize your labor, you want to utilize your capital investment, your time, your land, and so forth. Yes?
Are greenhouses becoming passé with the hoops?
Well, actually, they're calling them high tunnels, and, and it's still a hot thing that everybody seems to be doing. Yeah. And even outdoor vegetable growers are extending the seasons. Right. Because the way the marketing works is people have been without fresh produce in the winter, so the price is higher early in the spring. So to get that high price, people are adding the high tunnels. Okay. So with crop insurance, what amount of coverage do you need? And you don't want to wait until you have a disaster to decide, oh, I should have had more. You really need to think, if something happened and I lost my crop, can I survive with this amount of crop insurance that's going to come back to me? What are the implications of a crop loss on your ability to pay your debt obligations and to live? And how much does the crop insurance cost? When you're looking at new technologies such as insect predators, for example, is this lower cost than the current system? Will this change the environmental quality? Will it increase my crop yields? What's the learning curve? Things like that you need to think about. Overall production risk, what's the benefit of adopting new technology? Will it reduce or increase my risk? And is one risk management strategy more profitable than another one? And should I just buy crop insurance rather than changing my production practices if I'm doing that as a way of risk control? So for your production plan, this should be fairly simple. You see one that I made on page 27 for this Garden State greenhouses. What crops am I going to produce? How will I produce them? What technology and equipment will be used? What are my varieties? And do I have any other farm-related technologies that are selling at a bazaar, spraying for other farmers, selling agricultural chemicals and so forth, if I want to add to what I'm producing? This is what I'm looking at, this production plan. This isn't really part of your business plan per se, but it's something that you definitely need to keep track of things that happen. And I'm giving you an example here of production records, things that everything I do, I need to keep a record of it. And this little handout is showing you how to make it what they call a Gantt chart, that you can add up all the tasks, how much time, and do your labor, but you need it for other things. Like, for example, I'm ordering my plants in January, I'm disinfecting the soil, I'm planting tomatoes, and I'm applying pesticides, and I'm showing who did it, how much they used, and I may also want to write who I bought it from if it's an input, when I did it, and the time. And on the back of this sheet, I just made you a form. I would suggest you just use this as a guideline, but you take a spiral notebook and you keep a record of everything that you do in your greenhouse or business, I mean, not greenhouse, farm of whatever kind it is. Who did I borrow this from? Oh, it was an extra? Okay. There's several things, just to give you some example of how this could help. For example, if you're growing vegetables and there's an outbreak of some blight or something that hurts, like somebody dies, they eat a tomato and they die, and they point it back to you. If you have these records, you can show what you used, that you followed the label directions, that it's not you, for example. There was an example of someone who said the neighbor was complaining that their asthma was terrible because of something they were spraying. Because of these records, they showed that they weren't spraying anything that would have caused that. I work a lot in Turkey in the last couple years with women farmers, and they say a lot of their produce gets stopped at the border because of pesticide residues. So if they have records of what they've sprayed, when they spray it, you know, that might be helpful in situations like that, because with those UPC codes, everything's getting tracked back to the farmer. So it's to protect you, it's to protect the customer. So, yes?
Question, would we have to also have those UPC stickers on our vegetables or no?
It depends on your market, and you know, supermarkets are asking them.
A farm stand, for
No,
example,
no.
But if you were to sell to a supermarket?
Supermarkets are going to probably want you to do that. And you know, years ago, no farmers used them, and the supermarkets were wanting it, and farmers were resistant. But you know, they're your customer, and remember we said listen to what the customer wants. If that's what the supermarket wants, and they're not going to buy from you unless you do that, you probably need to find a way of doing that. And that's especially, I mean, when you're doing direct marketing, it's a little different, but if you're selling to any wholesale market, there's traceability back to you. Protects you and it protects the customers.
And the UPC label is just an identification as to the farm that it came from?
Well, it includes lots of other things, like the supermarket has the price, but there's also information that goes back to what farm it came from. Most things in a supermarket can be traced all the way back to the supplier.
Where do they come from? How do you get them on your product?
Oh, you're out of my... I think you can print your own. I mean, I know in the greenhouses, they have to put them on all their plants, and there's machines. There's machines that you buy, and you buy the software program, and you buy the labels, and like I said, you'd have to talk to a supplier, but...
It's like a mystery, those
yeah.
Produce, I don't think you can print your own because they're that big, you know.
Yeah.
But I think I have seen them in catalogs before.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like
In produce, it's usually on the individual produce.
Well, I think in the codes too, I think like number 4 would be means it's conventionally
Right.
grown.
Right.
Number 8
You know, there's probably a system.
Nice.
it gives you the designation.
You're talking in the supermarket. There's those lookup codes that just have a 4-digit number for each different kind of vegetable. Is that what you're talking about?
What's that called again? SKU.
SKU.
The SKU.
And I know anything that gets put on produce. You know, we did years ago when I first came to Rutgers. We were doing some market testing of premium tomatoes, and we had to get stickers that, you know, had the glue that was edible, so if people actually ate the sticker, it wouldn't kill them. I mean, there's so you'd have to look all that up. But there's lots of rules to everything in this country. So, as you see on page 27, I've listed all the crops that I'm going to grow as Mrs. Green Jean's greenhouse, and then I also wrote a little description for them. that says Mrs. Green Jean's Greenhouse is a nursery located anywhere USA. We purchased the business last year. The previous owner produced only bedding plants. We want to develop a year-round production and sell primarily to retail garden centers. We hope to increase production sales over the next 5 years. And remember, the Farm Credit people talked about 3 years. We've got 5-year plan. If you can only do 3, that's good, but 5 is better. We're going to use the existing space more efficiently. The existing head house is the staging area for planting and preparing plants for delivery. It also has storage capacity for containers, fertilizers, and bags of growing media. And then the following table, which is the one you have on your handout, is our production and price projections for each crop for the next 5 years. We plan to work closely with our county agent and use integrated pest management as much as possible. Thanks, Jenny. So, and here's our what we're planning to do, what the prices are, and so forth. So, you said that part should be simpler for you because that's talking about what you're going to produce, and that's usually what farmers love to do. And this really ties then into the financials, because once you get the quantities, you start putting numbers on those and developing your income statement, your balance sheet, and your cash flow statement. The FSA people yesterday gave what they called a business plan, which is basically the financials, because when banks look at it, the heart of what they're looking at are your financials. And it was a nice little layout to help you categorize what you're going to produce. And it said it was online, but it didn't say where the website was. So maybe we can also add it to our web page, because I want to. How are we doing on time? Okay.
8 minutes.
Okay. Because we had, you know, to try to do a business plan in a day is crazy. But we're giving you a good start, and we're covering just the basics. But there are other sections that we're not covering. So what I try to do in this workbook is describe some of the sections you might want to include. And the little green boxes give you tips or things that you should ask yourself to make you think about what you want. The orange boxes are the example, and then the white boxes you fill in. So some other categories that we're not covering today would be the estate plan, which we have. If you can go tomorrow to Madison at Drew University. We have these 3 sessions concurrently, and we have an out-of-state speaker who's really good on estate planning, and you will definitely need an estate plan for your farm. There's risk management section, a management plan. I'm trying to remember who. Somebody, was it Farm Credit, that was talking about you need to define each person and what their roles are, so there's a place in here for you to do that. And then they also talked about goals and objectives, and we have a section there if we have a little bit of time. And goals should be SMART, so specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. So an example would be SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. So an example would be, I would like to increase my sales by 5% in the next 3 years. So it's specific. I'm not, saying 50%. I'm saying something reasonable. I can measure it because I have what percentage it is and when it's going to happen. So at the end of that time, I know whether I've reached that goal or not. Okay. So there's a section.
Is that in our notes somewhere?
Yes, it's on page 12 and 13. We have examples of objectives, and then goals and objectives, and we have a space for you to list some. And I think they mentioned you should have some short-term and long-term goals. I remember when we were doing that marketing plan, he had sort of long-term things, as I want to be my own boss, I want to own my own business. Those are, yeah, you know when you obtain them, but usually we want numbers. Like if you're doing it for a shorter period of time, like 1 to 2 to 3 years, then you have numbers like increase sales by so much money, reduce cost by so much, increase acreage by so much, or increase the number of customers, things like that you can measure.